When I read her book, on the other hand, the thing that struck me most was that in real life, she was so much more interesting a person than she ever portrayed as a character on screen. I mean, this is a woman who was pursued by the literati. You know, Sinclair Lewis was enamored of her. Not to mention the men she married, who were very good writers too. She hung out with a very high-toned crowd, and very sophisticated, literate men were smitten with her.
I always gravitated toward writers because I liked the idea of having someone really to talk to, you know. There are some wonderful, handsome leading men in motion pictures, and some in particular I remember were just so good looking that you could just feel, oh, you know.
Oh, isn't that terrible?
But you know, you couldn't have had a conversation with them.
That's true. I'm telling the truth. You know, the truth is one of the most beautiful feelings in the world to have. To be able to say the truth and tell the truth is exciting.
but I always gravitated toward writers because they were interesting, they had thoughts to express and did express, and it was always stimulating, you know.
And one of them I remember was
From a summer theater situation, you know, Gunquit, Maine, I think it was.
No, it was Skowhegan, Maine, Lakewood. And at the time, Fay had an admirer who'd come from New York and who was staying for some days and seeing her and enjoying her company. And that admirer was a gentleman named Clifford Odets. Wasn't the first time that I'd seen Fay Wray. When I was still at school, I was out front worshiping her as an actress. She was a great star. I had no sense whatever that I'd one day play with her at the Lakewood Theater in Skowhegan, Maine. And then later on, I found myself playing with Fay Wray in New York in a flop called, oh yes, of course, Mr. Big, right. But back to Clifford, who had really paid no attention to me. And I knew Mr. Odets' plays and was a huge admirer of his.
And Clifford Odets was touring for the summer with a friend, and he stopped to see something in that particular theater. And afterwards, people went to a little tavern to have apple juice.
Because there was no bar around Lakewood.
And talk. So I was attracted to that thought of being able to share a little time with him and talk with him.
And Fay asked me if I would come along and have a drink. And Clifford, who I had met several times before, had a strange characteristic. He had eyes. They almost seemed to bulge out, and he would fix you with a gaze that was very penetrating and rather disturbing. And we sat and had our drinks and chatted and gossiped.
He was interesting, and I admired what I knew about him, that he cared a lot about his fellow man and wrote about socially conscious themes. Rocket to the Moon was one of them, I remember.
Waiting for Lefty.
Waiting for Lefty, yes. That was the one, that was the first one that really, I think, made him very famous, right away. Perhaps too soon, but he was highly appreciated as a great writer. So when I went back to California after meeting him, and I had many, many, many letters from Clifford Odets, please come to New York, and help me. So I went to New York to see Citizen Kane, ostensibly, that was it. because Orson Welles was a friend of mine, Dolores Del Rio. They had been going together for some time, and there was going to be a premiere in New York of Citizen Kane. So he went with me and Dolores and Orson Welles to see to the opening of Citizen Kane. But I want to tell you that it was a very peculiar feeling for me, because I didn't know if I'd really done the right thing to go all the way to New York and to have this rendezvous feeling with Clifford Odets. And so I didn't really see the film for its values. I really didn't. And then we went to dinner after, and I admired Clifford Odets because he seemed to have a heart for humanity. And that was undeniably attractive to me. So
Did you fall in love with him?
I thought I was in love with him, but I'm sure I wasn't. Afterwards, you know, I thought, no, not really. But I did feel for a little while that I was in love with him, yeah.
And what happened in the relationship? Why didn't you marry him?
Oh, he did ask me to marry him, but then he became a changed human being all of a sudden, and said that he felt that he had to be a man of misery in order to express himself, and that I might make his life too pleasant. But what I discovered about him was that he had to be unhappy in order to work well. And I think that really was true. Isn't that odd? And I just walked out of the house. I'd been in the house, but I'd never left a garment there. I never left a garment there. Yeah.
That's fascinating to me. Do you mind telling the story about how you would first meet Sinclair Lewis?
I first met him, again, in summer theater up in Maine, I think it was. And he thought he was in love with me. He used to write beautiful poems to me, yeah, and send them to me. And I liked them, but I did not like him. I mean, he was very unattractive looking person. And he was inspired to write a play, he thought, by me, and he called it Angela is 22.
Now, didn't you write that together?
Yeah, I did a lot of writing on that. I really did, yes. And he loved what I wrote, and he was fascinated with my ability to write. And he looked for my letters. He was excited when a letter came. And I analyzed his work as a playwright. And I enjoyed his appreciation when I wrote to him about the work that we'd both been doing on the play, and my ability to analyze it and evaluate it. And he found that very exciting and very, he said, very stimulating.
And they made that into a film.
Yeah, yes, but it was not well cast, I don't suppose. I never saw it. We did the play in the summer theater together. And it was just really hazardous. It was terrible because he didn't know which side of the stage he wanted to be on, and I didn't know what he was going to do, and it was very difficult, but never had any relationship with him in an emotional way at all, just as a writer, because physically he was just awful. I would think, you know, I had that feeling about him. I wanted to run from him, but he was an intellectual giant, no doubt about that.
Now, it's interesting, I never thought of it before, but summer theater was quite an inspiring place for you. And
Yes, it was. Yes, summer theater was very, very wonderful for me. I enjoyed it enormously, yeah.
And evidently so did some gentlemen. Wasn't there another gentleman who kind of fell for you in summer theater? That this one had an airplane?
Howard Hughes, yes. Well, I had known him slightly long before because he had been a friend of my husband's. Now, when I met him when I was in a summer theater, it had a more romantic tone to it. He had just come from flying around the world.
1938, Howard Hughes hurries to his plane for the start of his race around the world. 3 days, 19 hours, and 9 minutes later, his Lockheed brings him back to New York and a new record. In less than 4 days, he saw 5 sunrises, and the plane actually beat the revolution of the Earth on its axis.
He had just been honored with a ticker tape parade in New York, and then he went to this party, and I went to that party. And it's true, he didn't look very well groomed. His belt was kind of, you know, loose, and his clothes were raggedy looking. But the ladies there just were whispering behind their hands about Howard Hughes and how unattractive he looked. And instead of appreciating that he had just flown around the world and had just had a ticker tape parade. And I felt bad about that. And so my sympathies went toward him. And maybe he knew that I was willing to talk to him where other people wouldn't. He didn't look good enough for these elegant ladies to talk to. Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing.
Yeah, just amazing. But then he drove me to the theater where I was going to be acting. And then he drove me to the theater more than once. But you know,
Did you fall in love with him?
No, I liked him. I liked him. I was very attracted to him. He was so, he seemed so lonely. He seemed so lonely. And he had had more adoration than most people ever get, and in a public way, you know. But he just seemed like a lonely human being. But I think that he probably just wanted to add my affections to his list.
And you were looking for more?
Oh, so much more, yes, so much more, yeah.